nuclear energy accounts for approximately 10% of the world's electricity. Given growing geopolitical uncertainty and a need to find alternatives to fossil fuel, many countries have recently invested in nuclear energy. This includes the UK, who recently announced the construction of a new plant in China, and China, who is committed to building 150 reactors by 2035. Given this, and the fact that Australia is the most uranium-rich nation on the planet, how can we continue to justify the current ban on nuclear energy?
As you were saying.
Well, I think it's a ludicrous ban. I know why it was done in the politics of the day, in regard to the GST. That was the background to it, about how they got the Australian Democrats to come to the table and agree to it. But I think, and because all the arguments back to me in the last few years had been about economics. They say it's too expensive. Well, my argument back to them, then you shouldn't be afraid to lift the ban, because no one's going to do it because it's too expensive.
That's fair.
And actually what I'm finding in the industry now, because I declared my interest, I'm on the board of a uranium company that's registered on the London Stock Exchange, and we do uranium mining and also nuclear production, nuclear energy production stuff. And I can tell you, since Glasgow, we've been knocked over by countries around the world asking us what is it going to, for us to ramp up our production, for us to get more mining happening, is just going for the door. We just can't keep up with that. And it's happening on a global stage. And you look at, China, we've got things, China, Japan, Korea, England, Britain, and a number of other countries that have come to us and saying, we want you to do this stuff. I just find it really interesting. And look, you look at Germany, for instance. Germany was the picture boy of renewable energy. And it turned out that they were lying. Anyone in the industry knew they were lying. They said they're getting rid of coal, they said they're getting rid of gas, they said they're getting rid of nuclear and all that. And guess what they were doing? They were buying gas and coal from the Russians.
Yeah.
And then look what Australia's doing at the moment. We've had to come out and go to fossil fuel to help us not get into blackouts and all these other things. So I just find it strange that, a lot of other countries in the world have seen the light and actually moving ahead and creating more nuclear power and nuclear energy, and we're sitting here on a ban.
Do you feel like that's because we don't, as a collective, understand what nuclear energy is and what it can do? Because I don't know about you guys, but whenever someone mentions nuclear energy, I just think of big red buttons and Chernobyl and just disasters. So if someone could explain to me how nuclear energy is going to be the way forward,
we have a scientist with us, Hannah. I think he may be raising his hand as we speak.
So I'm a physicist, so I can absolutely explain it to you, but I'll put everyone to sleep, I think.
My wife's a physicist.
Can I separate this into two things? And to the original question, Australia is 1% or 1.4% of the world's emissions. That's not the point. The point is the whole world has to solve this problem. We have to stop the effects of climate change, and they're going to be with us until next century, regardless. So we do have to stop.
I know you want to get to nuclear. I know Hannah desperately wants that answer.
No, it's all right.
But you did identify, Larry, the idea of the impact of geopolitics. And the fact of the matter is that China is building more coal-fired power stations. That other countries are doing that. And if we're going to move on that, you need cooperation between the big powers, don't you?
Very much. But with respect to the question of nuclear, so let me separate that into two bits.
From little things, big things grow.
That's right. Good song too.
That's my general life philosophy, Stan, and I think that's the life philosophy that we need to have, that even if Australia is only 1%, if we get the ball rolling, the ball will just keep rolling.
Yeah.
And Hannah,
but you hit the question on, you've raised the biggest question that and bell the cat, as they say, and that is, we need to talk about it and we need to educate people about it.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the day, whether we do it or not, at least people are doing that from an educated position.
Well, we've got an educator here. So.
So look, as far as our energy needs, we don't need nuclear to solve our climate change problem. I'm not ruling anything out, but when you have as much solar and wind resource and as much land as you have in Australia, you don't really need the nuclear option for your own energy. But the question of climate change is a global challenge, and there's lots of other parts of the world that do need nuclear because they don't have solar assets, they don't have enough land, they don't have enough sunshine or wind. And those countries largely are looking at nuclear as an option. And a really challenging question for us is, what do we do with all of our uranium? And do we do what we do with everything else? Do we ship it as a raw commodity and then buy it back 10, 100 times the value? Or do we do something to it to add value to it in this country?
Can I bring Sarah in? Yeah. The argument is often made, Sarah, that here is a cleaner form of energy that even in the transition phase may be useful looking at. Is there any circumstances in which the Greens would look again at nuclear? Because certainly Peter Dutton has said that that's part of what they're looking at now in the opposition.
Yes, but I think the Peter Dutton and his opposition seem all over the place on climate policy right now. So, you know, on the Conservative side of his party, they're talking about nuclear. On the moderate side, they're trying to work out...
Well, sadly, there's no one here to defend themselves in that position. We did make invitations, but unfortunately no one was available. But we will come back to the question about nuclear.
I'm happy to answer the question of nuclear. It would be good if the opposition actually had some type of climate policy, however. The point in relation to nuclear, though, is it is massively expensive. It is not timely enough for Australia's response, and in fact, Australia's contribution to the world's response on climate action. The CSIRO, Larry, of course, you know, have put out a report, Gen Cost report, which clearly shows that nuclear power is at least 3 times more expensive than renewables, even when you factor everything in. And we have less than a decade to go to reduce pollution in this country and around the world to actually tackle dangerous global warming. We don't have time to waste. We don't have time to wait around for another decade that maybe, hopefully, some type of nuclear power station could be built. And I hear the cries from those in the Liberal Party right now, and I say to them, well, you tell me which town, which suburb do you think this nuclear power station should be built, and I'll come to that town and I'll debate you, because I bet your bottom dollar that clean, renewable power with storage will be cheaper for everybody's power bills, quicker to do, and will actually solve the climate crisis.
Warren and then Jenny.
I argue the point on cost. If you look at the cost, then how come Germany and Denmark, the most renewable countries in Europe, have got the most expensive electricity? And you look at France, and France has got the most cheapest electricity. So everyone raves on about the cost. It's also a question. I'm an investor, right? I'm an investor, and I got other people who invest. And I tell you what, there is big bucks to be made on those investments. So if it was so bad, then why aren't people investing, and why are people looking at this area, and why are, and I'm waiting for Larry to come, why is the countries with nuclear energy got cheaper electricity if it's more expensive?
I do want to come to Jenny.
Because at the end of the day, the consumer only cares about what they're paying.
The CSIRO have looked at the cost. They say it's at least 3 times the amount. So if you're paying, you know, up to $1,000 on your quarterly bill right now at home, Jesus, that's going to be a very expensive electricity bill by the end of it. And you wouldn't have solved the climate crisis.
My case was, if you go to the OECD figures, you go to the UN figures, France, all these people who have nuclear power have cheaper electricity
but Warren,
than the other countries.
But Warren, we don't here in Australia, and it's going to take at least...
Yeah, because we don't have nuclear.
At least a decade. It's going to take at least a decade, and if that, A lot of the technology that they're talking about.
You know how long I've heard that for 50 years?
Well, and it's still not here.
And
it's still not
because
here.
you keep
and
on
yet,
saying it'll
solar
take 10
panels,
years, it'll take 10
battery
years.
storage, renewables is powering up. You know, I come from South Australia. There are days when renewable energy powers almost 100% of our electricity generation. It can be done. It is being done. It's good for the climate. It's good for people's electricity bills. We need the government to set the direction and say, go ahead and do it.
Well, and that's a question for the government, because it also raises the question, doesn't it, when you have renewables at the moment, fossil fuels contributing to about 60% of our electricity supply. And you mentioned South Australia, of course, we've seen blackouts. We've seen blackouts in other places as well. Is there the option for nuclear in that transition phase, backup phase? Are you prepared to look at that again?
We don't have time to wait for a nuclear debate to take place. So I think Mr Dutton said that there needs to be a conversation. I think our view would be it would have to be a very quick conversation, because we've got all of the information before us saying that the cheapest form of new electricity is solar and wind, even when you take into account the things that you have to do to firm that. And I actually just... I dispute Warren's, I guess, diagnosis about what's gone wrong to date, and also sort of don't share your pessimism, Warren, about what it can look like in the future.
I'm not pessimistic, I'm an optimist. I'm very much an optimist.
Okay. Well,
but on the renewables front, I mean, the reason that we're facing some real challenges this winter is actually because there's been very limited investment in new capacity in the system over the last 9 years, because there's been 22 different energy policies from the then Liberal government. And it's meant that 4 gigawatts of capacity has exited the system and only one's come in. We need to create some certainty so people can start investing in these new technologies, which we know work and we know can power our
we are
future.
going to have to move on, Sarah.
I just want to say, part of the issue is, of course, the gas companies are gouging everybody right now and ripping off the consumers. They're making massive profits. It all goes overseas. They're not paying enough tax. With so much stuff we've got to do right now to get the energy and the renewables back on track.